وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم نور قلوبنا بالعلم وزين أخلاقنا بالحلم وافتح بيننا وبين قومنا بالحق وأنت خير الفاتحين. أمسينا وأمسى الملك لله والحمد لله لا شريك له لا إله إلا هو إليه النشور. أمسينا على فطرة الإسلام وكلمة الإخلاص وعلى دين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى ملة أبينا إبراهيم حنيفا وما كان من المشركين. اللهم إنا أمسينا منك في نعمة وعافية وستر فأتم علينا نعمتك وعافيتك وسترك في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما أمسى بنا من نعمة أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك فلك الحمد ولك الشكر. يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. رضينا بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا. أحبتي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. طفتم وطابتم ممشاكم وتبوأتم من الجنة منزلا بإذن الله. ثم أما بعد. As it was announced several times, our topic for tonight inshallah will be Islamic Finance 101. Basics of Islamic Finance. What is the main difference between Islamic finance and the traditional or non-Islamic finance to start with? The very first thing I will discuss with you briefly is the name itself. When we say Islamic finance, is it really fair enough to call this kind of financing system as the Islamic one? Can we call it Christian one? Can we call it Jewish one? My answer, believe it or not, my answer is yes. The Islamic finance system is the Christian finance system, is the Jewish finance system. It is a divine system, came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through His prophets and messengers. Of course, we do have like several characteristics that make this kind of finance different in nature, different in vision, different in mission, different in plan from the traditional or the man-made finance system. However, this system again is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It does have different characteristics, right? Not only one of them. One of them, for example, is the lack of uncertainty or gharar, which means that whenever you get involved in any transaction, you need to know what you will be paying, how much you will be getting in return, what are the scenarios that you will be getting, something and so on and so forth. Anything that brings harm to the society at large, you cannot get involved in it, even if the finance system actually is an Islamic one. You need to make sure that you get involved in something that brings some value to the society, something that makes sense, something that is beneficial, something that is healthy, something that brings prosperity to the society. Maybe you agree with me that the most important Jewish difference between the so-called Islamic one and the non-Islamic one, or the man-made, or the traditional one, is the lack of riba. Okay? The lack of riba. Whenever riba is implemented in any finance system, that finance system actually is not an Islamic one, even if it is called otherwise. Whenever riba actually is there, the system actually is not an Islamic one. And when there is no riba, of course I will explain what does it mean. When there is no riba, then you are very close to the Islamic finance system. Where did we get all this information from? The Quran itself that we recite day and night is the one who indicated clearly that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited the Jewish community from dealing with interest. وَأَخْذِهِمُ الرِّبَا وَقَدْ نُهُوا عَنْهُ. They used to transact with interest while they were prohibited from doing so. And in what is so-called Bible that people refer to nowadays, there are several places, several verses where Isa alayhi salatu wasalam was prohibiting his community from dealing with interest. So the one who prohibited interest, any Christianity and in Judaism, is the same one actually who prohibited riba in Islam. We are not coming up with something so-called brand new. We are just copying and pasting from the previous message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to humanity. We always hear the term riba, lack of riba, implementation of riba, interest-bearing transaction, interest-free transaction. What kind of riba we are referring to? What is the definition of riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited? As I always say, if you go to the traditional fiqh books and read, you will be getting confused big time. You read the different names, riba al-fadl, riba al-nuqud, riba al-nasa, riba al-nasiya, riba al-ta'am, exchanging, for example, wheat for barley, exchanging rice for sugar, exchanging apple for orange. All these different examples might be correct, but they are very, very irrelevant to our society. Muslims in the United States in 2022 do not exchange barley for wheat, right? Do not exchange apple for orange. People nowadays actually have different finance system, different monetary system, different economic system. They just even the cash money, we barely use cash money nowadays. So all these different examples might be confusing for us. There is one category, one level of riba that its prohibition is agreed upon. Its prohibition is agreed upon. And to my very humble experience in this field, the vast majority, maybe more than 95% of the interest-bearing transactions in the United States nowadays belong to this category of interest, which is actually riba diyun, which is the interest-bearing loans. Interest-bearing loans. What does it mean, interest-bearing loan? Let's go all the way to this definition. I want you to remember it, because from now on, whenever I refer to the word interest, actually I mean this one, the one that you see here, which is the premium that must be paid. The premium must be paid by the borrower to the lender, along with the principal, either as a condition for the loan or for the extension of its maturity. This is actually the riba that I'm referring to. One more time. It is the premium that has to be paid by the borrower to the lender, along with the principal, either as a condition for the loan or for the extension of its maturity. Let's break it down. Premium and principal. Principal actually is Ras al-Mal. Premium is whatever you have to pay on top of the principal. Okay. Now, lender and borrower. Oh, we are talking about loan agreement. Someone actually is lending money to somebody else. So the advancer of the money or the financier I don't have the charger because it is almost fully charged. Unless you can bring the charger. So we are talking about a loan agreement. No, that's different. Yeah, this is USD something. Yes. Right. So one more time, we have premium and we have principal. Principal actually is Ras al-Mal. Premium is whatever you have to pay on top of the principal. We have lender and borrower. So we are referring to a loan agreement. Someone actually is lending money to somebody else. So the lender actually is the financier, is the one who provides the money, and the recipient of the money actually is the borrower. Now, premium that must be paid by the borrower to the lender along with the principal amount, either as a condition for the loan. So we have two different scenarios here, where riba actually is introduced to the interest-bearing loan. Scenario number one, either as a condition for the loan. Condition for the loan in the sense that if you as a borrower, if you are not willing to sign or to hit submit online, that yes, I am willing to pay 2 or 3 APR. APR stands for annual percentage rate on top of the principal, you cannot even proceed. You go to Bank of America, you go to Hillsboro, you go to Chase, and you apply for a personal loan. You apply for a student loan, you apply for investment loan, right? If you are not willing to commit yourself from day one, that $100,000 has to be paid back 103 within 1 year, if the APR is 3%, then you cannot proceed. If you tell them, okay, I'm a practicing Muslim, I don't deal with interest, well, with all due respect, you are by your own, no money. So this is actually what I mean by as a condition for the loan. And I want you to remember that in this scenario, interest actually is unavoidable. Okay? If you do not agree to pay interest, then there is no money for you. Now this is one scenario. Other scenario actually that it did happen in the past, and it might happen even nowadays, that people actually transact or deal with one another, giving interest-free loan. Interest-free loan. Here's $100,000 from now until the end of 2022, right? If you pay me successfully in full before the end of 2022, you're good to go, no consequences. If you default, I'm gonna charge you such and such. It could be per day, it could be lump sum, it could be percentage, it could be one time charge. All these technical details actually do not make any difference whatsoever, because we are discussing the issue from a fiqh perspective, not from a technical, industrial, banking perspective. So one time charge of $100 or $1 per day or 1% APR doesn't make a difference. Okay, what we care about is that there is an extra amount of premium according to the definition here that has to be paid on top of it. It did actually happen in the past that people used to lend to one another based on interest-free loan, believe it or not. Okay? $100,000 until the end of the year. If you default, then I'm going to charge you such and such after or by the beginning of 2023. You read, for example, the reason behind the revelation of the ayah toward the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permanently prohibited interest. يا أيها الذين آمنوا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وذروا ما بقي من الربا إن كنتم مؤمنين. Or you who believe, be conscious to your Lord and quit, okay, or refrain from taking the remaining interest if you claim to be believers, right? فإن لم تفعلوا فأذنوا بحرب من الله ورسوله. If you are not willing to quit, then you are waging a war against Allah and His Messenger. وإن تبتم, but if you repent, فلكم رؤوس أموالكم لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون. And if you quit, then okay, this one until you see. Should be good. وإن تبتم, and if you repent, فلكم رؤوس أموالكم لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون. Commercial break. It is lunch, I think, for some reason. Yes. Actually, everything is done here for some reason. I don't know. I'm unable to go to the presentation. Maybe you can help me. وإن تبتم فلكم رؤوس أموالكم لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون. But if you repent, then you have to limit yourself to your principle without oppressing others and without being oppressed by others. Oh, we are ready. The reason behind the revelation of this ayah, according to several resources, is that you read, for example, in Muwatta Imam Malik, reason behind it, قال كان الرجل يقرض الرجل فإذا جاء الأجل قال أمهلني وأزيده. People used to lend to one another interest-free loan. Upon the maturity of the loan, the lender would approach the the lender would approach the borrower by saying, إِمَّا أَن تَقْضِي وَإِمَّا أَن تُرْضِي. You have two options. You either pay me in full, the principal, you're good to go, no consequences. But if you want more time, that would be fine, but you need to pay me more. Or otherwise, أَمْهِلْنِي وَأَزِيدُ. Maybe the lender, the borrower would approach the lender by saying, I know that the loan is due, I do not have enough money, give me more time, and I will pay you more. أمهلني وأزيدهم أو إما أن تقضي وإما أن ترضي. فأنزل الله سبحانه وتعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وذروا ما بقي من الربا, the ayah that I just recited. So this is actually the definition of riba, in which its prohibition is something that is agreed upon. You go with the Shafi'i madhab, with the Hanbali, with the Maliki, with the whatever madhab you follow, every single individual actually is in agreement from those great scholars that this is the level of riba in which its prohibition is agreed upon. And as I said, the vast majority of the interest-bearing transactions in the USA, in the US finance system, belong to riba al-nasi'a, which is riba al-diyun. كان الرجل يقرض الرجل فإذا جاء الأجل قال أمهلني وأزيدني. So from now on, whenever I refer to the term riba or interest or usury, right, I mean, you know what I said, the premium that has to be paid by the borrower to the lender, along with the principal amount, either as a condition for the loan or for the extension of its maturity. Someone might say, well, if I go to Bank of America and I take $100,000 loan for 3% APR, and I take that principal to upgrade my business or to establish a new business, I make 10, 15, 20% net profit. After 2 or 3 years, I'm able to pay off the principal and the interest. If everybody is happy, the bank is making some money, and I'm making some business, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibiting that? That's a very good question. What you mentioned actually is just like one scenario. There are some other scenarios who are extremely different scenarios. It does happen every now and then that the borrower makes 10,000% profit. I mean what I say. It's not 100%, no. It's 10,000% profit. Is it too big? And it's not projecting here. Oh, it's not projecting. So how can I switch?
Turn off the app.
No? Oh, right. No, that's fine. That will do it manually. It does happen every now and then that you borrow money from the bank and you do not make 100%, you make 1,000, sometimes 10,000% profit. Of course, it's not fair enough for you to give only 3% or 3 APR, okay, from the principal as an interest to the bank, and you keep the rest for yourself. And the other extreme scenario actually does happen. Well, it did happen back in March 2020, just a few weeks before the pandemic started, hitting the economy in the USA when everything actually was frozen. It did happen that some people took a loan from several banks, okay? And it was proven that those people, like there was no negligence or carelessness from their side. But because of the unavoidable circumstances and the natural disaster that happened, which is the pandemic, they were unable to make a profit. They were unable to even break even. They were unable to maintain the principal or even to survive. They just lost everything. Literally, they lost everything. By the law of the land and by the agreement between the lenders and the borrowers, lenders do have the right to go after them, asking for the principal and asking for the interest as well. And you see the extreme actually injustice in those two different examples, where you make a tremendous amount of money as profit, and you give only like fractions, to the bank on one side. And when you run out of business and you just shut down your business because of the pandemic, and the bank still actually goes after you, asking you for the principal and asking for the profit or for the interest. Both extreme scenarios bring a lot of injustice. In a very technical term, we call this mode of finance, we call it risk shifting mode of finance. Risk shifting in a sense that the bank is not taking any risk whatsoever. Bank is just sitting and relaxed, having millions of trillions of dollars, giving you money. You are literally by your own. You make a profit, you break even, you incur loss. The bank does not care about you, does not care about the outcome result of the loan, does not even care about the nature of the business, whether you trade in something that makes sense, okay, that brings some value to the society, some benefit to the society, or something that's extremely harmful to the society, right? The bank actually does not care. As long as you are committing yourself to pay interest to the bank, you can go ahead and take the money. So that is called a risk shifting model, right? Someone is taking the whole liability responsibility, and someone else actually is not taking any responsibility whatsoever. In the Islamic finance system, just imagine that we have a genuine, sound, authentic Islamic finance practice, right? And you went to the Islamic bank asking for $100,000 loan, okay, to establish a business. The bank would say, sorry, we do not give you money as a loan. Because from our perspective, loan is not a mode of finance. To start with, loan is not a mode of finance. In the traditional finance system, loan is the only mode of finance. Okay? What is the main job of those mortgage companies or those traditional banks and financing system? Lending money with interest. Are we on the same page here? Lending money with interest. They do offer maybe some other services, checking account, wire transfer. That does happen, but they're more like a big chunk of business. Their core business is lending money with interest. In the Islamic finance system, there is nothing called a loan for business purposes. Loan in Islam actually is an act of devotion, act of charity, act of cooperation between people. I do have some $5,000 saving, and someone actually is knocking my door, wants to buy food for his family members, or to pay the rent, or to do a surgery, or to pay the tuition fees for his kids, unable to find cash money. I'm more than willing to give him those $5,000 and wait for maybe a few weeks or a few months, and I'm willing even to incur the inflation, because actually I'm anticipating nothing other than the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is an act of devotion. It is an act of devotion. But if I do have, which is not the case of course, if I do have $100,000 and someone actually is asking for my money, $100,000 as a loan for business purposes. I know that he does have his own business, car dealership for example, and he wants to take my money, okay, because he's a practicing Muslim and I'm a practicing Muslim. We do not deal with interest, right? So he wants to take my money for 2 or 3 years, upgrading his business, making 20, 30, 40% profit, and then after 3 years, giving me back the $100,000 with a big hug and jazakallahu khairan, here is your money back. Seriously? Are we doing business here? Is this like a good option for me, or a good decision for me to give him $100,000 as an interest-free loan? That makes no sense whatsoever. That makes no sense whatsoever. If I know that you want to take my money for business purposes, why can't you make money and profit from my money and deprive me, okay, the owner of the principal and the money, from making money like you? That makes no sense. Let's sit down and talk business. Let's sit down and talk business. Okay? We can pick and choose any of those so-called Islamic modes of finance. Islamic modes of finance, that fits perfectly fine for that particular purpose. Okay? You want, for example, to construct or to build a building, office or a house, okay, we have something called istisna. Istisna means manufacturing sale, right? The financier actually is fully responsible for buying the raw building materials and to contract someone to do the construction. He or she has to be fully liable and responsible throughout the whole process long from A to Z. And because of the liability he's taken and the time and the effort of contracting, people to do the business and to do the construction, then he does deserve the profit that he's asking for. So he builds, the house for me, for example, for $500,000 and sells it back to me for $700,000 for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever. Because of the risk that he is taking, he deserves the money. I want to buy an existing house. It's already there, right? The best mode of finance is what is called the diminishing partnership or the declining partnership. Let me give you an example. We have two different siblings, brothers, Muhammad and Abdullah, and they both actually want to finance their home. Muhammad has chosen to go with a traditional mortgage company. He went with Chase, okay? And Abdullah actually decided to go with an Islamic finance company, Islamic mortgage company. Just imagine, just close your eyes and imagine that we do have a genuine, actual, real, non-fake, genuine Islamic finance practice, which is not the case, nowadays, to be honest with you. There is nothing called like a pure 100% Islamic finance practice. Just imagine that it is the case. So Muhammad applied for $500,000, okay, loan, and he was approved, and he has to pay the amount, $700,000 within 20 years. Okay, $500,000 principal, $200,000 interest for the next 20 years. So far so good. Abdullah actually did the same. He was approved by that Islamic mortgage company for $500,000, right? And he has to pay it back $700,000 within 20 years. Someone was just passing by, doesn't know what's going on. Okay, and he said, well, what is the difference? Muhammad borrowed $500,000 and he has to pay it back $700,000, and Abdullah borrowed $500,000 and he has to pay it back $700,000. What is the difference? Well, this question actually has been raised during the revelation of the Quran itself. That confusion, that misconception regarding the similarity, okay, between sale agreement and loan agreement is not something new. ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وأحل الله البيع وحرم الربا. They said that sale agreement and loan agreement are the same, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did permit the sale agreement and did prohibit the loan agreement. Here is the difference. Muhammad, throughout the whole 20 years process, is fully responsible for the appreciation and the depreciation if any natural disaster happened, foreclosure, eminent domain, maintenance, tax, insurance. That mortgage company does not care about him whatsoever. He took $500,000, right? And he has to pay it back $700,000 period. While Abdullah actually established what is called the diminishing partnership or declining partnership with the Islamic mortgage company. Okay, Abdullah. Muhammad actually did pay 5% down payment, okay, and he borrowed like 95% the rest of the amount, and he moved on with the agreement. Abdullah did the same, but guess what? Abdullah established 5% equity in the house, and that Islamic mortgage company purchased, okay, bought the rest of the house. And we have to make it clear that the name of the Islamic mortgage company is listed on the deed of trust or the title as an owner, not as a lien holder. As an owner, not as a lien holder. Now, based on this actual real partnership between Abdullah and the Islamic mortgage company, throughout the whole installment, okay, 20 years installment, they have to share the major expenses proportionally. Maintenance, tax, insurance, they have to be shared by the two partners, by Abdullah and the Islamic mortgage company proportionally. Let's say, for example, like property tax, insurance, and major maintenance, not the wear and tear, right? Let's say that after maybe 10 years, okay? Now, based on this diminishing partnership, by the way, if the fair rental value of that house is $2,000, for example, then Abdullah has to pay $2,500. 2,000 rent, $500 on top of it to increase his equity in the house. So Abdullah starts with 5% ownership or equity versus 95% Islamic mortgage company. After 1 month, he becomes 6% owner, 94, 7%, 93, 8%, all the way. Okay? Now, toward the end of the 20th year, and upon the payment of the last mortgage payment, he kicks out the Islamic mortgage company and becomes the exclusive owner of the property. Maybe after 10 years, as I said, okay, he became 50% owner. Abdullah. He decided for some reason to move from the state of Oregon and just go to somewhere else. He is not interested anymore in continuing with that deal. That would be fine. He can just put the house in the market. If there is any appreciation for whatever reason, let's say that the house was sold for $100,000 profit, net profit, right? Then he takes $50,000, okay, for himself, and gives the Islamic mortgage company $50,000 because they are partners. For whatever reason, there was a depreciation, and they lost $200,000 from the original market value of the house. Believe it or not, he's gonna incur $100,000 loss, and the mortgage company has to incur $100,000 loss. In case of eminent domain, in case of natural disaster, whatever situation might be, they are partners. Okay? They share the profit and they incur the loss, proportionally based on their percentage of ownership. That is the difference between what happened with Muhammad and what happened with Abdullah. ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وأحل الله البيع وحرم الربا. Every single mode of finance in the Islamic finance system has to have a certain amount of risk, a certain amount of liability that has to be taken by the financier in order for him to justify the money or the profit he is asking for. If you want to make a profit and flourish with your business, ahlan wa sahlan, we would love to see you profiting. However, you have to show us that you are taking that amount of risk and liability in order for you to justify the profit that you are asking for. Where did we get all these conditions from? Is this something that we made up? No. This is actually what the Prophet ﷺ himself established a while ago. نهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن بيع ما لم يقبض. Prophet ﷺ prohibited selling before possessing, which means that before you sell something, you have to own it, you have to possess it, you have to be the exclusive liable party for it. Now, because of the possession or the legal ownership, you can ask for whatever profit you want. ونهى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن بيع ما لم يقبض وعن ربح ما لم يضمن, as well as he prohibited profiting without taking the liability. In the other hadith, he said عليه الصلاة والسلام الخراج بالضمان. Subhanallah, very precise, very straightforward to the point. الخراج بالضمان. Profit follows liability. Now, in a very technical term, we call this mode of finance, we call it, instead of risk shifting, we call it a risk sharing one. A risk sharing one. No one is taking the huge liability and responsibility by himself, and the other one just sitting and relaxing, waiting for the money. This actually does not exist in the Islamic finance system. So remember, from now on, when I refer to the term riba, I mean the premium that must be paid by the borrower to the lender, along with the principal amount, either as a condition for the loan or for the extension of its maturity. Now, what kind of challenge we Muslims in this society are facing when it comes to riba? What kind of challenge? In my opinion, it's not the fact whether riba is haram or halal. I mean, that's something agreed upon. You don't have to spend any waste any time asking Muslims, what do you think about it? Is it haram or halal? Well, it is haram. Okay? By default, معلوم من الدين بالضرورة that riba is prohibited. Problem here is that, what is the definition of riba? Alhamdulillah, now we are covered with this part. The actual problem is that in the real life, in the real business that we conduct, we come across several charges. Okay, charges. You either have to pay to others, okay? You either have to pay to others, or you charge other people. Those terms are very different from what we have read in the classical fiqh books. Okay? As I said, when you read in the classical fiqh books, riba al-fadl, riba al-nasa, riba al-nasi'a, riba al-diyud, riba al-jahiliya, riba al-qamh, riba al-ta'am, I mean, all these different terms. In the real life in the United States in 2022, you come across a charge called late fees. Late fees. Sometimes penalty, okay, commission, overdraft charge. What else? Interest, honorarium, right? What else? Cashback, and so on and so forth. And you start scratching your head. Cashback, is it the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited or not? Late fees, am I charging others interest? Okay, or am I paying interest when I pay late fees? That's actually the challenge that we are facing here. Okay, mortgage, for example. So we need to unlock the secret of those contemporary transactions in order for us to find out whether or not someone is giving money to somebody else. If it is proven that someone is advancing money to somebody else, right? And the recipient of the money is the one who is taking full liability. And the advancer of the money, or the financier, the one who gives the money, is not taking any liability and risk whatsoever, then that is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited, whether it is called riba or called otherwise. We do not care about the names. Rather, what we care about is the nature of the agreement. The nature of the agreement. Even if you twist or manipulate, you just play with the terms, you just remove interest and you put something else, honestly, we do not care. Okay? What we care about is the essence and the nature of the agreement. And again, if we can deduct in any transaction, any enterprise, any partnership, any deal, any business, that someone is giving money, cash money, to somebody else without taking any liability whatsoever, and that advancer of the money is guaranteeing his principal and guaranteeing his return on top of the principal, then that is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. This actually takes us to a very fundamental, as you see on the screen, fiqh maxim, يعني قاعدة فقهية. Okay? The قاعدة goes العبرة في العقود للمقاصد والمعاني لا للألفاظ والمباني. What matters in transactions is the essence and the reality, not the wording or the formality. What matters in transactions is the essence and the reality, not the wording or the formality. Again, even if you just tweak the terms or just manipulate some of the terms, you remove something and you put something, this actually does not make any difference whatsoever. Okay? Our job is to find out, and just investigate. Of course, when it comes to riba, is it proven that someone is giving money, giving money to others, and that money is guaranteed? That money is guaranteed, and the return of the money is guaranteed as well. If the answer is yes, then that's the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. Well, believe it or not, you might come across certain agreements or business contracts where the term riba or interest is explicitly mentioned in the agreement, but it is not the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. And I'll give you some actual real examples. Let me ask you this. If I give $5,000 cash to my brother here, and I tell him, okay, you keep that money with you, and by Okay, we are now in October. Okay, by October of next year, 2023, is Allah here. You pay me the $5,000 plus $500 on top of it. You call it whatever, interest or whatever. So the 5,000 has to be paid back 5,500, right? 5,500. What do you call this deal? Interest-bearing loan. Am I correct? Okay. Now, by the agreement that you have, the verbal or the written agreement, I don't care about the outcome result of the 5,000. I mean, he is absolutely by his own, and he has to commit himself to pay me back the 5,500 within 1 year from now. What if I have decided to go to Wells Fargo and open a saving account, right? Giving Wells Fargo $5,000, and based on the agreement, okay, they have to pay me back. I'm just giving random, numbers. Okay, they have to pay me back $5,500 by October of next year. Okay, what is the difference between this deal and my deal with Wells Fargo? Is there a difference between the two? They are just identical, copy and paste. Well, if this is an interest-bearing loan, then opening a saving account is an interest-bearing loan. When you open a saving account and your principal and your interest on top of the principal, okay, both are guaranteed by the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, it means that you are lending your money to the bank, and the bank is guaranteeing the principal, and the bank is guaranteeing the return. Well, that's an interest-bearing loan. Someone might argue that and say, do you want to tell me that I, the one who has only $5,000, is giving a loan or lending my money to Wells Fargo, who has hundreds of millions of dollars? And my answer is yes. Okay? It doesn't go by who has more and who has less. Okay? What we care about is the nature and the essence of the agreement. If I'm giving my money to Bank of America or to Chase or to Wells Fargo, and the principal is guaranteed, and the return on the principal is guaranteed as well, that is the interest-bearing loan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. Now you can see it clearly that العبرة في العقود بالمقاصد والمعاني لا الألفاظ والمباني. Now the banker actually of Wells Fargo, or the agent that you open a saving account with him over here, will not tell you, okay, we are borrowing your money. Okay? They look at it from a different perspective. It's just a saving account. But from your perspective as a practicing Muslim who knows the rules of riba, you know that your principal is guaranteed and your return on the principal is guaranteed as well. That is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. Another example. You have in your debit card, like your checking account, only $300 available balance. And you stop by like a point of sale, right? And you purchased an item for $500. Usually the transaction goes through. Okay. Now, when you receive your monthly bank statement, you find out that you have to pay $200 back to the bank plus $35 overdraft charge. Overdraft charge. Okay. We need to find out, what's going on here. We need to reinterpret or unlock the secret of what happened. When you have only $300 and you purchase an item for $500 and the transaction goes through, it means that someone already paid the $200 on your behalf. Am I correct? Okay. Is it a gift or you have to pay it back? It's not a gift, no. You have to pay it back. Right? You have to pay it back. Well, it means, again, from a fiqh perspective, that you are borrowing $200 from the bank. Does that make sense? You are borrowing $200 from the bank. If the only thing that you need to pay is the $200, then nothing to worry about. You borrow $200, you pay it back $200. Problem here is that you have to pay on top of the $200 something else called overdraft charge. Well, it's not interest, no, it's overdraft charge. Well, call it whatever you want. I don't care. Okay? From my perspective, $200 loan has to be paid back $235, even $201, right? Well, the extra money or the premium is the interest that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give. That is the default rule. Is it possible that the bank is taking that $35 overdraft charge for facilitating the transaction or processing? I mean, that's very possible. Do not get me wrong, very possible. But the default rule is that anything that you have to pay on top of the loan that you have taken from the bank will be counted as interest. You borrow 200, you have to pay it back 235, then that is interest. Okay. Every single utility bill that you receive on a monthly basis does have like a certain amount, due amount, and it does have like a due date. Is that correct? If you pay in full or partially after the due date, then you have to pay what is called, who can help me?
Late fees. Penalty.
Late fees, actually. I just want to make sure that everybody is awake because the light is off. So it's after the Isha, so I'm just afraid that people might fall asleep, especially that I cannot see anyone because of the light. Are you awake there? So far so good? Okay. So I was saying that on top of the utility bill, you have to pay what is called the late fee. Okay. Let's interpret what happened, or unlock the secret of what happened. When I have to pay to T-Mobile $250 for the family plan that I have for myself and my family members, it means that I'm using or utilizing their service for one complete month, and toward the end of the month I owe them $250. Technically speaking, I did not borrow $250 from them, but actually I owe them $250. Like for me as the president and CEO of Guidance College, toward the end of the month, I owe my employees their salary, right? Okay. I did not borrow from them, but I owe them. Okay. In a very technical term, we call this a debt. It's not a loan. We call it a debt. That means dayn versus qard, debt versus loan. In many cases in the Islamic finance system, debt and loan are similar to one another, identical. So all the rules apply to a loan, apply to a debt as well. Back to T-Mobile. Toward the end of the month, I owe T-Mobile $250, as if I have borrowed, which is not the case, as if I have borrowed $250 from them. If I have to pay more than $250, right, by just delaying or holding my payment, or paying after the due date, then I'm subjecting myself to pay extra on top of the debt or the loan, which is by default actually will be counted as interest. Now I think you can easily see the pattern here, right? You see the consistency here. Every single transaction before you pass a judgment on it, is it haram or halal, you need to interpret and just unlock the secret of what's going on and find out, okay, what is the mechanism of that transaction. Based on that, you can pass a fatwa that, oh, this is haram because someone is giving money with no liability, with no risk, and guaranteeing the principal, guaranteeing the return as well. One more example. How about mortgaging a house in a traditional way in the US? What does it mean to mortgage a house? When you mortgage a house traditionally, do you know that you are getting involved in 3 different transactions simultaneously? In the mortgage process here in the USA, there is a sale agreement where you purchase a house from the landlord, you as a customer or client, and there is a loan agreement. Of course, you do not have $500,000 to pay cash for the house, so you apply for a loan. You go to a mortgage company and you apply for a loan. And upon the approval of your application, the mortgage company would pay $500,000 on your behalf, payable to whom? To the landlord. $500,000. And you have to pay that $500,000, $700,000 within 15, Allah, 20, 30 years more or less. Right? Now, number 3, in order for the mortgage company to secure their fund, to make sure that they're gonna go after you and get their fund back. If you default, la samahullah, you passed away, you walked away from the house, you just escaped the country, went somewhere else, okay, they can go after their property and repossess it. That is actually called rahan. That's called rahan. We do not have an issue with the sale agreement, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ. And we do not have any issue with the rahan agreement. Okay, according to the Quran itself, وَإِن كُنتُمْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ وَلَمْ تَجِدُوا كَاتِبًا فَرِهَانٌ مَقْبُوضٌ. So if someone actually is lending money to somebody else and he does not know him well, there is nothing wrong with the lender to ask for a collateral. Someone asked me for $100 loan to be paid back to me Sunday morning before I go to the airport and just go back to Houston. With all due respect, if I do not know you, can I ask for your phone to stay with me? I'm going to keep your phone or your watch as a rahan until you pay me back. Whenever you come back, you give me 100, I'll give you your watch or your phone back. That's called rahan. وَإِن كُنتُمْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ وَلَمْ تَجِدُوا كَاتِبًا فَرِهَانٌ مَقْبُوضٌ. So we do not have any issue with the rahan, according to the definition of rahan in the Quran, of course. We do not have any issue with the sale agreement, but we do have an issue with the loan agreement. You borrow money, and you have to pay way more than what you have borrowed. Do not get confused. If you see the name of the bank or the mortgage company on the deed of trust, that's absolutely correct. But they add their name as a lien holder, not as an owner. And there is a huge difference between lien holder versus owner, right? They do not possess the property. They do not own it. They do not have any equity in the property whatsoever, but they put a lien on the property to secure their fund. As I said, if you default or if you foreclose, for example, they can just repossess the property and kick you out and get their property back. So again, you can easily see the consistency here and the pattern here, right? You just navigate through any transaction. As I said several times, if it is proven that someone is offering money with no risk and the return actually is guaranteed, then that is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. Now, let's take a different example. How about credit card cashback? Credit card cashback. Cashback. Is it the riba? I mean, is it okay for you to spend on your credit card to purchase an item or several items for $100 and to get $5 cash back? Before you answer the question, you need to find out what's going on. Who is the borrower when you use your credit card? You borrow money from the credit card company. Am I correct? So when you borrow $100, if you pay it back 102 or 105, then you as a borrower, you pay more than what you have borrowed, right? That is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. But in this case, you purchase, you borrow $100, and you get it. And you pay it back only 95 because of the cash back. So you borrow 100 and you pay it $95. Are you paying interest here? You are not. This is absolutely the opposite of interest. So you borrow and you pay less. So cash back actually is halal because it is actually the opposite of riba. Another different example, okay? You wanted to purchase a house owner finance, okay? Away from those like mortgage companies or even Islamic mortgage companies. And the owner of the house, the landlord, Mr. John Smith, okay, said that this house is for $500,000 cash. And he said, John, I do not have $500,000 cash. I said, okay, that's fine. We can do an owner finance, but I'm gonna add interest. So he pulled his calculator and started doing math. He said, okay, $500,000 principal plus $200,000 interest for the next 20 years. And he said, well, this is interest, I do not pay interest. He said, you take it or you leave it. If you do not go to Bank of America or to Chase or to Wells Fargo to borrow the $500,000 and pay it back to John Smith and pay the amount, $700,000 to Bank of America. Rather, you do owner finance between you and John Smith. Believe it or not, the extra $200,000 here are not interest. Although actually it was mentioned clearly, 500,000, half a million principal, $200,000 interest for the next 20 years. Well, it is not the interest that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. This is one of the cases where the Islamic finance system does acknowledge something called the time value, قيمة الزمن, right? In economics, sometimes we call it the opportunity cost, the opportunity cost, which means that if John Smith has decided to sell that house to somebody else for $500,000 cash, he was able to make $200,000 from those $500,000 within the 20 years. So because he compromised that opportunity and has decided to give you the house, then you have in return to compensate him for the difference. So you pay him $200,000 on top of the principal, and the interest in this case is a halal one. Because basically there is no loan to start with. You are not borrowing money from John Smith, rather you are purchasing a house from John Smith. That house is for $500,000 cash, or for $700,000 for 20 years. You know what? Or for $600,000 for 10 years. So even if he calls it interest, it is not actually the interest that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. And so on, so forth. You can now easily see the process that we go through in order for us to unlock the secret of those contemporary transactions. Of course, I mean, we have a lot to talk about, especially tomorrow, inshallah, when it comes to the retirement account, right? Investing in the stock market, insurance in general, right? But let me just open the floor. Where's Brother Mustafa? Is it a time for question and answer, or you want me to talk about something else?
I think it's good, inshallah.
Fine, let's open the floor for question and answer. Let me start from my right side here. No. If you want to use the mic, it's up to you when I talk.
I have a question about the most example that you gave. If you're purchasing a house from the person directly without the loan, so and you said you're paying on the top of that the $200,000, to compensate the buyer. Who's guaranteed that this money is going to be paid? Is this going to be conditions on
okay.
the contract?
The default risk exists every time, everywhere. Yeah. Even in the Islamic finance system or traditional finance system, the default risk is always there. If you borrow $100,000 from Bank of America, always the default risk is there. I mean, that borrower might pass away, might deny the loan, might default. So this kind of risk is not what we are, talking about. We're talking about actually is the actual risk by involving that money in actual real business and establishing a partnership with the borrower, if you wish, or with the partner, if you wish. That is the risk that you are referring to. Of course, always there is a possibility of default or death or denial of the loan, but this is something common, right? Now, the risk shifting that I'm referring to is the outcome result of the loan. What did you do with the money? Did you make a business? Did you make a profit? Did you break even? Did you incur loss? The bank does not care if it is traditional, and if it is an Islamic one, the bank does care because the bank actually is initiating a partnership with you. That makes sense. لا خلاص.
Tomorrow, inshallah.
طيب, let's go with Brother Umar.
So I have a few questions, and let's go one by one so as not to get lost in these questions. The first one is about the bank and the interest from the bank. So we all know that we are in financial issues and problems, and Fed start increasing interest rates, and we expect maybe by next year, so maybe interest rate could go 5, 10, 15%. So let's take a case study, something like Egypt right now, when they have interest rate like 15% or so, and there are some mashayikh in Egypt from Al-Azhar specifically, like Sheikh Sayyid Tantawi or Ahmed Al-Tayyib or Ali Guma, whatever you agree or disagree with them. So I'd like to understand your explanation of their fatwa bases, who are saying that investing or putting money in the bank and taking the fixed interest rate is halal. And they have some rulings, they said that first, the riba in that case is not riba because you put it with intention of investing. Second, they said that the riba that is haram is the riba adafan muda'afa. Third, they said, oh, so now the money is different than the money before after the Nixon shock, and the dollar is separated from the gold. So they have many, probably you are aware of all of this. So my question here is, this is a khilaf mu'tabar that among the scholars, or not a khilaf mu'tabar? Because some of our family members, specifically the elder one, they feel it's safe to put their savings and money in banks taking interest than investing in uncertain business that could end by losing all their saving or all their life saving. So this is my first question.
Wallahi حقيقة يعني the Muslim community across the globe highly appreciated Al-Azhar as an institute. And if we all agree that Al-Azhar is a good reference in this regard, then Al-Azhar itself, مجمع البحوث العلمية والإفتاء في الأزهر, back in 1964, issued a very historic and important fatwa that فوائد البنوك هي ربا المحرم. Back in 1964, the fatwa was not politicized. The contemporary fatwa, with all due respect, unfortunately, has been politicized big time. So if we refer to Al-Azhar, then Al-Azhar itself is the one who initiated a very straightforward fatwa that فوائد البنوك هي ربا المحرم. All these justifications that the currency nowadays is different, this could be interpreted as mudaraba. This is absolutely incorrect. It's not a mudaraba because the bank actually is not sharing the loss with the customers or with the depositors. The bank actually is guaranteeing the principal and guaranteeing the return. Subhanallah, it might happen, it might happen once in a while that a certain individual, let's say like an old lady or a widow who does have some cash money and she has nothing to do with business. She does not trust people around her to give them the money to invest on her behalf. And she is looking for a steady income by just opening a saving account and securing some fund for her aitam or for her kids. Can she open a saving account, although the default rule is that this is haram and this is interest? She or he has to ask people of knowledge in his own locality and just verify if that person is muttar to open a saving account. And subhanAllah, in Amj a few weeks ago, we came across a hal or a case like this. An old lady who did inherit a big amount of money as an inheritance, but she has absolutely nothing to do with business. She cannot trust people around her, and she has aitam kids, and she is looking for a steady income. So for that particular lady, maybe because of a very special, exceptional circumstances, maybe Allahu Alam, she can, open a saving account. But this does not mean that saving account is halal. It is absolutely the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited based on the fatwa, non-politicized fatwa back in 1964. If you do not mind, if we can limit ourselves to maybe one question per person because of the time. And I promise, inshallah, I will be here tomorrow. I will not go to Texas on Saturday. So I'll be here, inshallah, tomorrow between 8 and 10. So we have part 2, inshallah. Okay? Fine. Let me go back to the sister side. Good to go?
So my question had to do, first. So too many topics, I'm trying to keep track of all the different concepts. You have the concept of lien on the bank. I'm wondering if that's the same thing as collateral. even though there's interest, there's still the lien agreement. Is that a collateral? The other one had to do with the time value. You said the time value is of the house of 5,000, now it's 700, but you're not guaranteed that the value will grow. If the value diminishes, what is the time value in that concept? And finally, how do you compel somebody to meet their obligations that they would pay on time? If you're an employer, you're supposed to pay your employee at the end of the year or at the end of the month. If there's nothing compelling you, then you'll pay them 2 months later. I don't know, could you hear me clearly on this?
Actually, I did, but I think you asked like several questions.
Yeah.
Can you just pick maybe like one question? I couldn't catch up with you. Give me just one question to answer, please. Go.
Okay. All right, then I'll pick the time value question.
Okay.
How is the time value not interest if what you are selling diminishes in value, then there's no time value increase? A person is now not owning a property. So a house for 5,000, and he promises to pay 7.
Okay. And this a very particular scenario. If you do owner finance, and the owner actually is willing to wait for a certain period of time, and he is compromising the other opportunity of selling his house, in our example, cash to somebody else. Let's say that John Smith, in my example, has decided to turn down your offer and to sell that house for $500,000 to somebody else cash. Okay? And based on the economic standards, he is able to make $200,000 net profit from that $500,000 within 20 years. I was saying, because actually he compromised that opportunity and he decided to give you the house, okay, based on owner installment, owner finance, then he does deserve those $200,000. Now, down the road, if something happened and there was an extreme fluctuation in the market value of the house, extreme appreciation or extreme depreciation, like what happened back, if you remember, in 2008, 2009, when the housing and industrial collapse happened in the USA. There was an extreme depreciation. According to the Islamic finance system, then adjusting the agreement to fit or to match the fair market value is very possible and very permissible. So the whole agreement actually has to be changed based on the market value. And this has nothing to do whatsoever with the fact that time value is acknowledged in this very particular case because of the opportunity cost that I explained. You are getting maybe more confused, or?
Definitely more confused, because now the risk is on the person who decided to wait, right? So, yes, I'm confused, but I don't want to take someone else's time.
Fine. Maybe I'll get back to you, inshallah. Oh, questions of mine? Can you show me how to change? Fine. So let's take technical issues. How the lender can be compensated for inflation and currency value. How the lender can be compensated for inflation. Well, there is no way for the. Okay, there is a question. So there is an online question here. Goes, how the lender can be compensated for inflation and currency value fluctuation. Okay. Here's my answer. As I said, in the Islamic finance system, loan actually is not a mode of finance. It has to be given as a kind of charity, as a kind of devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A part of that actually is for you, the lender, to incur that inflation. Okay? Inflation, like before 2021, 2022 in the USA, does not exceed more than 1% a year, which is something like very insignificant. If you are looking for, looking forward, for the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you give someone a loan, right, for maybe 6 months or 1 year. A part of the package actually is to incur the inflation, but you cannot ask for the inflation to be added, or the certain, the exact percentage to be added to the principal. يعني الديون ترد بمقدارها لا بقيمتها. That is something actually, I would say uncompromisable. You gave $10,000 as a loan, as an interest-free loan, you receive it back $10,000. Now, if the purchase power was $10,000 2 years ago, and the purchase power now, because of the inflation, went down to $9,700, $800, you incur that loss because you have decided to give a loan to somebody else. By the way, this problem actually did not occur in the past when people used to use currency with intrinsic value, gold and silver. Now, because of the intercontinental monetary system, we are replacing gold and silver with we call them fiat money, okay, in which it does not have any value whatsoever. Only it is backed up by the financial financial authority in the society. But to answer the question, actually, no one actually can ask for the inflation to be paid on top of the principal, with one exception here. If the fluctuation or the depreciation is extremely severe, that exceeded even 30% of the purchase power, that's a very, very exceptional circumstances. Someone gave, let's say, $100,000 Syrian lira to somebody else back in 2011, before the civil war, before the revolution in Syria. Okay, at that time, the 100,000 was equivalent to $10,000. Nowadays, the 100,000 Syrian lira is equivalent to, let's say, maybe $1,000. So how much is the difference here? $9,000, right? In this case, actually, it is very, very legitimate for the lender and the borrower both to share the loss. How much is the difference? $9,000. Then the borrower actually has to pay $4,500, okay, or whatever is equivalent to it in the Syrian currency, on top of that $100,000. But again, this is a very exceptional circumstances. We cannot apply it every time, everywhere. Only when the depreciation reaches 30% or more, then we can apply this exceptional law.
So I think you brought a good example about buying houses between a conventional bank and a really Islamic bank with respect to risk sharing and profit sharing. Are you aware of any Islamic bank of that kind in the US that would share the risk and the profit when buying a house?
No. Do you want to give the short answer or the long answer?
That's just the short answer, if there is such bank.
Right. The short answer is that we do have some attempts, okay, of providing Islamic mortgage alternative for Muslims in the US. We have 5 major companies who are dealing in the secondary market, who sell their contracts to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Like, if you know how does the mortgage system work in the US. Those companies, according to our Fiqh Council, according to AMJAD, the Assembly of Muslim Jews of America, are not in the same level of Sharia compliance. Some of them are very diligent and dedicated to come up with a model that is Islamically acceptable, reasonable. Meanwhile, those contracts are sellable in the secondary market. Some of those Islamic mortgage companies are less serious when it comes to providing an Islamic alternative, and some of them actually are not. So if you Google AMJA, AMJA, Islamic mortgage companies, you will read a full declaration in both Arabic and English about five major Islamic mortgage companies in the US, namely Guidance Residential, University Islamic Financial, Devon Bank, Ijara Loan, and Lariba. According to our analysis, Guidance Residential actually is a reasonable option for Muslims who want to purchase their own homes or houses without being involved in riba. because that company actually is operating as an investment company, not as a bank. So they are allowed by the law of the land to purchase a house and to hold the title of the house or the deed of trust like another individual. And that's why like those people who have purchased their homes with the guidance residential, they can see the LLC, which is like a small derivative, belongs to the mother organization, which is guidance residential. They create an LLC. That LLC represents guidance residential in owning the house. When it comes to financial duties and responsibilities, they are not 100% Sharia compliant. They do have some glitches and violations in the agreements to make their contract sellable in the secondary market. But overall speaking, according to our analysis, their mode of finance actually is a very reasonable, or as I always say, halal enough option for those who want to purchase a house. Now, second in line, University Islamic Financial. Okay, MJ actually did study the two modes of finance, the Ijara one and the Murabaha one, right? Along with Deep-One Bank, which is number 3 in line. According to our study, our declaration, they are almost the same. University Islamic Financial and Deep-One Bank. We said that whosoever needs to purchase a house can go with guidance residential. If not, then you go with University Islamic Financial, because the amount of violations are way more than guidance residential. University Islamic Financial came up recently, a few years ago, with a third mode of finance called Musharaka, which is a diminishing partnership. Musharaka actually was not analyzed or examined by MJ as an institute. But based on my personal assessment, I disapproved their Musharaka because it did not match the minimum requirement of Musharaka. And then after that, they moved back. There are two more companies. One of them is called Ijara Loan, which is a non-Sharia compliant according to MJ. And the fifth one is Lariba. Lariba is a non-Sharia compliant according to MJ Allah. That's the very, very short answer. Maybe inshallah tomorrow we can get more details on why those companies differ from one another.
I like your speech and how you analyzed the crucial differences. I would love to see in the future how would you analyze one of those recommended banks in the same way you did with your example.
Inshallah. Sisters, do you have any questions? Totally.
I heard recently about when you sell gold for gold, this is haram. Like this is common, you go to the jewelry store, you weigh your gold, they tell you this is the value, then you might buy another piece and pay the difference. You said it has to be transactions, like will you actually get the cash and then rebuy gold? And would that make sense to me? And then it makes the same thing.
Be in the safe side and do two different transactions. And you sell what you have, the jewelry that you have, the old jewelry that you want to sell, get your money, and then you buy whatever you want. But do not exchange, because jewelry actually does have some labor, some work that has a value. And according to the mainstream fatwa, gold is a kind of currency, although actually it's not the case nowadays, right? When you go to buy anything, you do not pay jewelry to buy food or drink. But still, according to the form there, gold is gold, silver is silver, even if it is in the form of jewelry, right? So they consider it as if it is a kind of currency. And that's why it has to be paid cash, right? You sell whatever you want. You cannot go in installment, by the way. If you want to go with the mainstream method, just have a peace of mind. If you want to go with a different opinion, which is the opinion of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, he said that jewelry is not a currency anymore. It's just a property. It's like the furniture and the chairs and the utensils that you have. And based on that, all the rules that apply to other commodities or merchandise apply to them. My recommendation, be in the safe side, go with the mainstream fatwa with the form of them. Sell what you want, get the money, and buy what you want. But you do them like two different transactions.
So my question has to do with mortgage. With the mortgages. So how in the Islamic finance arrangements that we have in the United States, how is the capital base? Is it investments from people, or is it a bond that is generated as part of the sales agreement?
when it comes to guidance residential in particular, okay, they stayed like off the secondary market for years and years, and they kept fighting until they got their case approved. You know, to start financing or selling their contracts in the secondary market. But in the first few years, they were just like operating independently, okay, without having a secondary, without selling their contracts back to Freddie Mac. For the rest of the institutions, they operate as banks, with the exception of Ijaron. Ijaron actually is not a bank, by the way. Ijaron is just a broker. They do not even have money. However, Ijaron is not a Sharia compliant, so no worries. When it comes to UIF, University Islamic Financial, as well as Devon Bank, they operate as banks, right? So they sell their contracts to Freddie Mac and Freddie Mac. In order for those contracts to be sellable in the secondary market, they have to be Freddie Mac compliant, right? They have to comply with the requirements of Freddie Mac. And the problem here is that, okay, those companies try, or they claim that they are trying to offer an Islamic finance alternative. And the Islamic finance ownership actually has to be proven, because ownership brings liability and risk, as I already explained, right? While in the traditional system, in the US, like, you know, finance system, ownership actually cannot be there. Okay? You have to show, as a bank, you have to show Freddie Mac that your mortgage contract is just a mainstream one. It's just an interest-bearing loan. You give $500,000, you take it back $700,000 with no liability, with no risk, with nothing whatsoever. Right? Maintenance, tax, insurance, ownership, none of that one. So if you want to integrate, if you wish, an Islamic finance practice within a non-Islamic finance practice, it is actually close to impossible. I mean, you cannot, because of the severe incompatibility between the two. Okay? You cannot be an owner, according to Freddie Mac and Freddie Mac, and you have to be an owner, right, according to the Islamic finance. Now, to deal in the secondary market and to show that ownership without having ownership, just a kind of myth, right? So this is, this is the reality that we are facing. If someone decides to operate off the secondary market, like Amin Housing next door here in California, they do not deal in the secondary market, okay? And their mode of finance is almost 100% Sharia compliant. They did have maybe some glitches in the past. I was their Sharia consultant along with Sheikh Salah Hassan and Sheikh Jamal Zarabozo. We went through the contract and we found out that they do have some glitches here or there. We submitted some recommendations. They complied with our recommendation. We issued a fatwa on AMJA website that Amin Housing actually is an excellent option. No one actually can compete with them. Not even Guidance Residential, because Guidance Residential deals in the secondary market. So they are a kind of tied, right? Mandated by Freddie Mac to follow certain directions in order for their contracts to be, sold in the secondary market. That's the dilemma that they are, facing. If that makes sense.
So just so I understand, so basically none of them are raising money, raising capital to be a partner. It is generated as a bond. It's just a question of whether it's being sold in secondary market.
They have to start off with a certain principle to get a license to operate as a bank. Okay. But after that, like going forward, they cannot wait for their customers for 30 years to pay off everything. That's why they turn their face next day in the morning selling that contract in the secondary market. If the value of the contract is $700,000, $500,000 principal, $200,000 interest, right? They sell it for $690 cash, right? And you deal with the Freddie Mac or Freddie Mac through them, right? Pay. Freddie Mac actually can't wait for 30 years, but Bank of America cannot wait. I mean, this is how the system works in the US. Yeah.
So some banks offer some bonuses when you open a new account or get a new credit card. So, like if we see it straightly, like you are not borrowing any money or loaning any money, But if you think that, okay, where this money is coming
Yes,
from,
yes. Open a checking account and you will be getting $200,
Yes.
you know, free deposit. Go for it. Yeah. I mean, this has actually nothing to do with riba. Because if you open a checking account, you are not borrowing money from the bank to start with, right?
right?
Okay. So they offer you, if you open a checking account with us, we'll give you $200. Is that correct? Yeah. I mean, you can go for it.
But if you think like this money is coming from the bank, who is getting the money from the interest from other people,
Which is fine. Which is fine. You are responsible, Akhi, for the permissibility of the deal that you sign with the other party. And this is regardless of the source of money with the other party. Okay? Very good evidence for that is the fact that the Prophet ﷺ used to deal with the Jewish community in Medina after his hijrah. Is that correct? And the Jewish community used to and still will continue dealing with riba. Is that correct? It was never ever reported. The Prophet ﷺ stopped any transaction until he further investigated where did you get your money from. Right? The most important thing is to make sure that the deal between you and the other one is halal. Where did he get the money from? That's absolutely his business. It's not my business.
okay, brother, thanks. Brother, one short question.
If we can limit it to one question, if you don't mind, I'll get back to you. If not tonight, maybe tomorrow, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, first, thank you for explaining the overdraft and late fees as a form of riba. This is enlightening.
Sure.
I've never thought of it as this form. So my question is, when does the riba kick in? Is it from the start before being late and acquiring the overdraft fees, which is riba? Same goes for credit cards. Is it riba if I'm entering the transaction while avoiding the riba and the interest paying the amount in full, or how does it go?
Here is the
Can you
issue.
repeat the question, Sheikh?
Now,
Repeat the question.
yeah, he's asking about what? Can you tell the microphone?
Yeah. So my question was the overdraft fees as a form of riba. When does the riba kicks in? Once I avoid, when I avoid the overdraft fees, or if I enter the late and pay the fees. Same goes for credit cards.
Right.
I'm in a transaction that can lead to riba. But if I'm avoiding it, am I in ithm or until the riba kicks in and I pay the late
No,
fees?
no. Akhi Kareem, when it comes to haram in general, in the Islamic law in general, not in the Islamic finance system in particular, the haram matters are of two different types or categories. There is something called haramun lidatihi, something that is prohibited for itself by itself. And there is something else called haramun lighayrihi, prohibited for other reason. Now let's apply this classification to riba. When you go to Bank of America and you apply for a business loan for 3 APR, for example, right? You are committing yourself to paying interest from day one, in which riba is unavoidable. If you are not agreeing to pay interest, okay, then you cannot proceed with the loan. Once you take the loan, then you have to pay interest, at least on papers, right? Now, this is haramun lidat, it is prohibited for itself, because the riba actually is integrated in the transaction from day one.
Yep.
Unlike if you open a credit card. Credit card, actually, you can use your credit card for years and years without paying one single penny as an interest. Yes, I mean, you have to sign an agreement or to agree that in case of cash withdrawal, in case of not paying my monthly statement in full before the due date, I will be paying interest. But even if you click submit or agree, or you sign and get your credit card, the fact that you are willing, or you show your willingness to pay interest, does not mean that you are paying interest by default, right? You agree, and you move on with the use of your credit card without paying one single penny as an interest, because you know very well how to navigate through the system and how to avoid riba. Now, what is the benefit of this classification? Our fuqaha al-Karim say, الحرام لذاته لا تبيحه إلا الضرورة والحرام لغيره تبيحه الحاجة. Okay, whatever is prohibited for itself cannot be permitted unless there is a necessity. Okay, someone is running out of options, he or she wants to, like, provide food for his family members, no money whatsoever, or to pay for the rent of his house, otherwise he'll be kicked out. Okay, no interest-free loan. Can he borrow money with interest? Yes, he can. That's something haram lidati, prohibited for itself, because that's an interest-bearing loan. But for that particular individual, in this very particular circumstances, it became permissible for him because of the darura, right? Now, the second part of the fiqh maxim here, وَالْحَرَامُ لِغَيْرِهِ تُبِيحُ الْحَاجَةِ. Whatever is prohibited for other causes would be permitted in case of public and general need. Now, credit card for Muslims in the USA is not a necessity. I mean, it's not a life or death situation, right? However, there is a public need for it. In order for you to build your own credit history, you have to have a credit card. In order for you to do certain transactions, sometimes online, you cannot pay cash money. You cannot pay using your debit card. You cannot pay like using a personal check. It has to be credit card. So there is a public and general need for it from one side, and the riba is avoidable, right? If you stay away from cash withdrawal, if you pay your monthly statement in full before the due date, then you can just keep, using your credit card for years and years without paying interest. And that's why you can use credit card in the USA, safely. However, you have to make sure that you stay away from any interest-bearing transaction.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan for listening. So, living in this country, riba in many instances is not avoidable. So sometimes you find that a check is coming for you as an interest, or you find that your employer is giving you some money back as an interest, or you open, for example, a saving account and you don't know that there is an interest and you find an interest. What is the recommended way from the Sharia perspective to deal with this money? Is it to give it back to the guy who gave it to you, or the institution, or to make sadaqah with this money, or?
Okay, if it is proven that a certain amount is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited, then what you need to do is just to dispose that money, okay, with the intention of getting rid of the haram money. يعني التخلص من المال بنية التخلص من المال الحرام. And this is actually a rewardable act. If I do have $500 interest, okay, while being able to use that money for yourself, yet out of my God-fearing, I decided to spend that money or getting rid of that money, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward me for that. But before we reach to that conclusion, we have to make sure that that money is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. As I said in the beginning of the presentation, a certain amount of money you might receive or you might pay to others thinking that this is riba, but actually it is not, right? Or certain charges that you might pay to others or you get charged by others, okay, called riba or called otherwise, but it is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. So it's all about education and just knowing what kind of money that you are receiving. Once it is proven that this is yes riba, then actually you have no choice but to dispose that.
Is it better to return it back to the person who or to make sadaqah?
No. You pay the money, you dispose the money with the intention of getting rid of the haram money. It's not sadaqah technically, because Allah Ta'ala طيب لا يقبل إلا طيبا. So sadaqah means donation. However, you will be rewarded in a different way. That willingly, like by choice and not by force, you are just getting rid of the haram money, which is a very a good act, a rewardable act, inshallah.
Another question, can I ask?
Maybe okay. Go ahead, brother. Wait.
Okay,
So let me take a question from the sister.
We had asked that question once in another masjid, and they said you could put it in the donation box as interest, and that masjid would use it in consumables like tissue paper and toilet paper and stuff like that.
Yeah, there is no base for this differentiation that this haram money has to be paid, excuse me, like for the restaurant. There is no base for this differentiation. Because what is proven in الفقه الإسلامي is that اختلاف الأسباب كاختلاف الأعيان. يعني that money is haram for me because the money actually came from a saving account, right? As an interest. Once I give that money to somebody else, it's not interest anymore. It is a halal interest. It is a halal money because the money itself actually cannot be haram by itself. It is haram based on the way that it has been generated, right? You read, for example, in Sahih al-Bukhari when the Prophet ﷺ visited with the Barira, who was a slave girl of Aisha, and she was cooking meat. So Prophet ﷺ asked her to offer him some of the meat to eat. قالت يا رسول الله إنه من الصدقة. Ya Rasulullah, this is a kind of donation provided by the Prophet ﷺ because of his status. He was prohibited from accepting صدقة. He was كان يقبل الهدية ولا يقبل الصدقة. قال يا بريرة هو لك صدقة ولنا هدية. Okay, when you receive the meat, it was a donation for you. Once you give me the meat to eat, it's not a donation anymore. It became a hadiyah. You see? So اختلاف الأسباب كاختلاف العين. When you have a different reason behind the ownership, actually change the status of the money itself. Allah.
So when you say, just to clarify, when you say dispose, what do you mean by dispose?
No. You just put it in the masjid, and you do not need to mention anything whatsoever. Just put it in the masjid. If the amount is big enough, I mean, just give it to me.
So we were talking about you gave the example of Muhammad and Abdullah that they have the Islamic financing. So Islamic financing company has the ownership, half 50% ownership or some percentage of ownership, and Abdullah has some percent of ownership. So who has the authority to sell the house? They both have, or like after a certain period of time, who will decide that they want to sell the house?
Well, it's up to the customer. I mean, usually those financing institutes, I mean, they would love to continue with the deal because this is how they make money, right?
Yeah.
So if the customer decided one day, not to break the deal, but actually to terminate the agreement without foreclosing, then he does have the right to just put the house in the market and we'll go through the process. We'll find out on how much is the profit or the loss, and it will be shared, proportionally based on the percentage of ownership.
So it's not a problem.
No, it is not. It is not, because actually partnership is يعني الشركة من العقود الجائزة. Partnership actually is a permissible, but it's not a binding agreement. Once we get involved in a business, we do not have to stay forever. If you do not like, partnering with me, you can just break the deal at any time, and vice versa for me. If I'm not happy with the partnership with you, I can just ask for breaking the deal, and everybody will be by his own.
So based on the answer to the Samara, can we actually put our money in saving account and dispose the money in the investment? Or is this,
No.
you said if it happens by chance that you receive
If you
money?
did not know that opening a saving account,
Just one.
then close it as soon as possible and dispose the money. The problem here, sister, is that opening saving account is haram walidati, because it is actually an interest generating account by default. Now the fact that you choose not to take the interest does not mean that there is no reward, that is actually still. And you support this non-Islamic system to generate interest, so it's not an option. Now what is the alternative? That's a different discussion. The alternative is a different discussion, right? Why you open a saving account to start with? Is it to save like the big chunk of money that you have? If the answer is yes, then you can open another checking account without releasing its information, and it will be safe. Okay? The possibility of identity theft will go down to zero if you do not share the information of the checking account. You do not use it like for writing checks or using a debit card. No one actually can have an access to your account. Now, if the reason behind opening a saving account is to make some money, at least to set off the zakat, the 2.5%, for example, when you can open a mutual fund account. Find any of those Muslim-based, socially responsible mutual fund companies. Alhamdulillah, we have a lot in the USA, and they make actually good profit. So if the reason behind that is to make some halal profit, well, open a mutual fund account, and you will make some money.
Well, the reason was to dispose the money.
What's that?
So to dispose the money. argument.
Yeah, I'm
You
not
can
taking
put it
the
in
interest,
an
right?
account so you can take the money, not donate, but use it in something. I understand what you said.
Yeah.
Something you need, like utilities or.
Yeah. Like, sure. تفضل.
Assalamualaikum, jazakumullah khair. I'm asking if a bank owns a property, can you buy it from him and they consider owner finance?
That's
The bank owns the property.
That's a good question. Amjad Fatwa Committee was asked this question a while ago during the 2008-2009 housing collapse in the USA. We did not come up with a consensus regarding this issue. But my personal opinion back in 2008, and I still insist that my answer is correct, Wallahu a'lam, my opinion is correct. If it is proven that you are financing a house with the owning bank, and the owning bank is the one who's doing the finance for you, even if they ask you to sign two different agreements, like sale agreement and a mortgage agreement or loan agreement, that would be fine, because the loan agreement is a very nominal one, it's not a real one. Right? It's just some paperwork that you sign in order for Chase or whatever bank, to sell that contract to Freddie Mac. But from your perspective, this is just bay'a bil-taqsil. This is an installment sale, right? However, the challenge here is to make sure that if the foreclosed property is owned by Chase, then Chase actually is the one who is financing for you. If there is a third party, then we are back to square one. Right, it is now 10, I think 15, 10 and 10. Inshallah, tomorrow we'll be having a session 2, like part 2 of this presentation. I'll be talking about the financial stability from, of course, like from an Islamic perspective. We'll be discussing, inshallah, the retirement accounts in details. What are the options that you have and how to make sure that your retirement account is as Sharia compliant as possible. Talk about insurance from an Islamic perspective. You'll be surprised that we do not have only one opinion, alhamdulillah, we have more than one opinion regarding commercial insurance and life insurance in particular. And what else? Yeah, I think investing in the stock market in general, retirement accounts in particular, insurance in general, which is the government-based or the mutual-based or the commercial-based. But inshallah, that will be our topic for tomorrow, inshallah. Yeah, between 8 and 10, right after the Isha. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Assalamu alaikum. Please leave the chairs as they are for tomorrow, inshallah. Everything stays as it is. Jazakallah.
For those brothers and sisters who made a commitment or a pledge for guidance, knowledge, and they will not pay it, I still have actually the donation box and the credit card machine. If you made a pledge and you want to fulfill it, please go ahead. I will show you. guidance, college, school, خليها عاد المرات الجايه
ان شاء الله ان شاء الله يا رب.
زي ما جزاك الله خير. بارك الله فيك.